Goedenavond allemaal, de laatste zaterdag-uitzending, voorlopig althans. We gaan de zomermaanden op maandag uitzenden, zoals al een paar keer is aangekondigd. En ik vind het wel heel leuk dat we vandaag juist Paul mogen ontvangen. Paul van Speyside Distillery. Paul is net zoals mij een hevige fan van het hardere genre, om het zo te zeggen. En ik vind het dus wel heel leuk om hem hier te mogen over spreken. Natuurlijk gaat het ook over whisky, uiteraard. Dus ik ben dan ook zeer blij om hem te mogen verwelkomen. En hier is hij dan alvast. Hi Paul!
Good evening.
You're online. Everybody can see you now.
This technology is incredible. So,
yeah.
It's still new to me, so.
Yeah, Benny was here before, and I was talking to him we were having a Paul, and he mentioned let's have a drink on it, and we ended up after a few drinks. I will not mention how many drinks I already had, and you're on the beer, so it will be great. It will be a great show.
This is the only Belgian beer I could find today, so this is the only Belgian beer I could find.
It's a nice beer. Dimitri says a very good evening to everyone, especially my friend Paul. You know, Dimitri, I've seen.
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
Yeah, of course we are here to talk about whiskey in general and Speyside Distillery, and we will be talking about something we have in common, the love of the metal, the one and only true genre, especially metal and punk for me, but yeah, sorry. Let's start with that. You worked for a time for Jägermeister?
Yeah, a long time ago. I worked for the UK importer. So one of the brand marketing is a kind of strange black art, but one of the things that they do very well is there's Shilton. Hello, Shilton. One of the things that they do is they sponsor a lot of rock bands and tours. They've got a lot of bands on endorsement, which most people feel, which scares the hell out of most people, but for folk like me, you get to hang around some very loud, some very great gigs, meet some amazing people, and it was 7 or 8 years. It was a great way to promote a brand and a great way to have fun at the same time. So
I can imagine that. When I look at the photos, they're all big names. So Dimebag, Lemmy from Motörhead, and so on and so on. So
I'm more upset because I have hair in those photographs. So
yeah,
it's gone. So yeah, we did that for about 8 or 9 years, and we worked with a lot of small bands, but they toured often with a lot of the big bands.
Yeah.
So the big, which is cool. The big bands help the small bands out. Some of the bigger bands, people like Slayer, who you flashed up a picture of Kerry earlier on, they were probably the biggest sort of supporter of Jägermeister as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
They used to do tours for us in America, and they would offer the opening slot on the tour to bands that were up and coming. Same thing with Ozfest, which is the rolling Ozzy Osbourne tour, and Slipknot got their break on the Jägermeister stage at Ozfest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the reason why Slipknot were always kind of cool when they came through town, and we were trying to get free tickets. So.
Roy said, okay.
I have to say this actually on the hair. Just looking at that comment, if you want to, I used to have sort of red hair. If you want to see yourself in 15 years, Gunther.
Okay. Yeah, I'm up to it already. So, and you did this for 9 years, you say? Working for
well, I worked for an import, a distributor in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a Belgian distributor, a Dutch distributor. I worked for a UK distributor. Jägermeister were a client. It's where we started with whiskey as well, though, because when I joined them in 2002, I'd worked in the wine trade, but I joined these guys 2002, and they had as clients Jägermeister, Luxardo, Grey Goose vodka, which we were launching in the UK at the time. It was still independent, and they had Isle of Arran distillers. So my first whiskey was my first distillery visit. My first whiskey was Isle of Arran, and it's
Okay.
incredible to see what they've, what they're doing now.
Yeah, that was at the beginning.
Yeah, they were like 6 years old at the time that we started with them, and still trying to find their way. And they've done amazing stuff. Hey, John, one of my old friends from back home there. So cool.
Okay. Okay. So I will be having friends in 15 years. So that's a good point.
That's okay. Yeah, I in fact, the last time I saw him, I think it was actually at a Slayer concert.
It has been a while then.
Still, no, I think it was the last tour, so maybe about a year and a half ago. So yeah, something like that.
Okay. Oh yeah, that was the last tour they did. Because they stopped touring, if I'm right.
Yeah, they did their farewell thing. I think it was at the end of 2018 or something. So.
Yeah. So you worked for an importer, and then how did you get to work for a distillery?
A couple of different things. I mean, the importer, there's good stuff and bad stuff about working for importers. One of the crazy things is if you work for an importer, you often build a brand, and then sometimes the brand owner will move the brand away.
Yeah.
When I worked with the UK importer, we had Grey Goose. It got sold to Bacardi or Brown-Forman, so we lost that brand. Over the time that I was with that UK distributor, we brought on Bowmore and the Suntory whiskies as well. So I was working with Japanese whiskey. From there, I went to a different distributor that had Bruichladdich, and I started working with Bruichladdich. However, Bruichladdich then, a couple of years later, Bruichladdich were sold to Remy Cointreau. And at that point, it was like, well, that was my biggest client. So a mutual friend, let me know that Speyside had recently changed owners as well, and we're looking for somebody to join them. So I went from that to working for a distillery, as opposed to being an agent for a distillery. So a lot of changes, a lot of good, again, small distillery, independent. But you see a lot more when you actually work directly for a distillery.
Yeah.
When you're a distributor, you see the finished product. Sometimes you can see a little bit before that, but here we see it the whole way across. So.
And you immediately started to work for Spy Distillery, or there was another distillery in the beginning?
No, it was I went straight to Speyside. They'd changed ownership. They had a new owner who took over in about 2012. So they were just starting out in Europe. Spey was quite a well-known product in Taiwan. One of their main customers was a chap who was essentially an independent bottler. So he had the Spey brand. He was selling it mainly in Asia. It was his company that took over the distillery in 2012. So unlike distilleries here, or most distilleries who start in Scotland and then spread out from there, this was effectively a distillery that was more well known in Asia and then started coming back to Europe and America from there. So,
yeah, and in your opinion, is that a good thing, or is it easy? No, is it more difficult to get a foot on land on Europe?
Not really. No, there's such a huge interest. Again, anybody that's probably never worked. I saw the thing you did with Juliet a couple of weeks ago, and the first thing I got. I'd worked in other countries as an importer, so I would be in other countries finding products to bring back. When you take products to new countries, so my first trip to Holland, my first trip to Belgium, all these kind of things, you're blown away by the levels of interest.
Yeah.
People in Scotland that don't work in whiskey probably don't realise how much interest there is. We see the news reports about how much the exports are worth and things like that. But, until you get to a whiskey fair in, Germany or Belgium, and there's 5,000 or 10,000 people there.
Yeah.
It's a real eye opener. It's fantastic to see, and everybody,
For us, Belgium, it's the same thing with beer, because we are used to having a beer, and it's all normal for us. But you're drinking it right now, and it's a special beer for you, because Leffen is one of the more common beers for us.
Yeah, well, it was all the local shop had. They bought all the good beer. I managed to get some Belgian chocolate biscuits as well. So I might have those later. I'm probably not supposed to be eating biscuits, but
okay. But
no, it's exactly. it's amazing because we've got a small country here, and there's a big whiskey industry. Whiskey gets made in lots of places, but it's a small country, 140 odd distilleries. But there's probably very few places in the world where you can't go where somebody doesn't want to talk to you about whiskey. It's incredible. Doors fly open. Luckily, people buy you drinks when they see you. It's great. So
that's a good thing. Or they send you beers, or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Paul, before you worked in the whiskey and the import business, were you familiar with whiskey in general or other spirits?
I was familiar more with other spirits. I worked for a winery. Like most people, I think you'll find most people end up in the whiskey industry, I think, by kind of accident, especially in the sales and marketing side of stuff. I mean, I trained as a journalist originally, but you will find, I know people who were teachers. There's people who used to be in the police force or the army. There's folk who've got PhD doctorates in something completely unrelated, but they sort of gravitate towards this. And I got a job for an American wine company that supplied supermarkets. So it was the not glamorous end of the business. But if you live in Scotland, sooner or later you would meet people that work for spirits companies at all the trade shows. And it was an American company. They wanted me to move to London. I didn't want to go. And they said, oh, but you have to be in London if you're going to be in the centre of the drinks trade. And you're like, well, actually, have a look around. We're in Scotland here, and there's, plenty of distilleries. So that's when you start looking, and, that's how I ended up primarily with spirits first. So, with the company I went to was Cellar Trends, and they had, over time, they picked up some of the best imported spirits, but also some amazing whiskies as well. And that's when that's where the whiskey education started.
And was you at that time already a whiskey lover, or just a regular user, or?
No, I was probably more at that time. I was probably
now and then.
Yeah, now and then. But the crazy thing is, most people in Scotland. I mean, Scotland's strange. Whiskey's not the biggest selling drink here. People in Scotland tend to drink more vodka than whiskey. If you look at the stats, it's crazy. I know.
Okay, I think you would say beer, but vodka.
Well, on spirit side of things, vodka is the biggest selling spirit.
Yeah.
If you go to any distillery in Scotland, look at the visitors book and look at where people have come from to visit the distillery, you often see a lot more European, American, Asian addresses than you would ever see domestic.
Yeah.
Yet this is on our doorstep. So the interest level starts there. Shelton's offering to send beer. Fantastic. Shelton would never send beer to anybody.
Yeah, maybe he has enough.
He'd send me the empty bottles.
You can send them back to Belgium. You get money for it.
That sounds good.
We have our first question. Man asking, what about business culture? I can imagine there are some big differences depending where you are in the world.
Oh yes, definitely. It's funny because the whiskey industry is quite relaxed. It's probably better to use a wine example, because I worked for an American winery, and they were very formal. So we would turn up at exhibitions, we would have suits and ties, and the Australian wine producers would be on the next stall, and they would be in t-shirts and shorts and very casual, very approachable. And you see a lot of that. The whiskey industry is quite relaxed. You see, but there are some countries you go to where there's still a very formal aspect.
Mm-hmm.
You stand in front of a screen, you don't tell jokes, you dress much more smartly. In a lot of parts of Europe, it's a lot more casual, it's a lot more approachable. I think I prefer that because, sometimes I think that way people start to recognize you from show to show, and you start to make friends rather than just business contacts.
Yeah.
And there's lots of people whose names are flashing up at the bottom of the screen there, and I hope they would agree, because we find ourselves in some pretty nice places, but in most towns you get to, then you can then go on Facebook, tell people you're there, and you get recommendations from
Yeah.
people who don't work in whiskey, for bars, restaurants, shops to go to. And that's great. You don't get that. I imagine if you work in a bank, you don't find that kind of camaraderie. So.
If they start telling you which restaurant you have to go or which other bank you have to go, it's not a big thing.
but in other countries, it's still there's still a lot more formality, you know. And the way they sell is slightly different as well. You know, there's a lot more in some parts of Europe. A lot of people do a lot of online interaction here, but in other parts, it's still very traditional, where they want to see the salesman and you taste the samples and things like that. So
thank you, Manu.
Brilliant. I didn't. I thought I'd put a shirt on tonight. I was going to.
I'm sorry. It's my bad.
To be fair, with all this online stuff, you're lucky I'm even wearing trousers. So.
Oh, you wear trousers?
I am today, but you know, this thing with everybody now online, the boss can't see below the. Yeah, it's fine. So you know, you have a suit here and Bermuda shorts here. So.
Okay, I'm wearing a string.
Oh, there's Lala. If you ever need to know anything about mezcal, you need to speak to that lady. So.
Okay, that's a good thing. If Lala wants to do a show with me, you're welcome. Just add me.
Lala, get in touch with Gunther.
Yeah, voila. That's French, by the way. Now we start talking about Spy. First picture, I will. This is especially filtered. I know he's looking at Michael Owen.
That's my football coach.
Are you kidding?
No, we were trying to get the other distilleries in Scotland to do during Spirit of Speyside Festival. I thought it would be a good idea to have an inter-distillery football league, and we wanted him to be the coach. But you know, we got told it was probably wrong to put a professional footballer in the team. So
no. I would make him a player manager. It's easier for you.
But yeah, he did. I've bumped into him a few times. He's actually been to the distillery with his family and everything. So he came up a couple of years ago for Spirit of Speyside Festival. We didn't tell anybody he was there. He just sort of stuck around and helped out on the tours. Amazingly, we didn't think a lot of people would be interested in football when it's whiskey distilleries. But I got tweets for days afterwards. Once it made it to the newspapers that he'd been to the distillery, I got tweets from all over the region telling me to like.
How did it work? If phoned you and he was saying like, I will come to the distillery. Let's have a tour guide, or
yeah, he sort of sat in on the tour. He did an interview with Mark Gillespie while he was there. But yeah, it's sad because he's obviously quite a famous guy, and he tends. I think a lot of sort of footballers and stuff in our country, they don't try not to broadcast where they're going to be until they're actually there, because if people realize their houses are empty, they might get burgled or something. So he came up. He was at the distillery for a couple of days, but I got messages from Mylin from Mexico. Again, Mexico's watching. Great.
Hey.
I got messages from bars all over the place saying you had them at the distillery and you didn't come to our pub. And I was like, well, I didn't think anybody would be interested in football, but there you go. So
yeah, but football is all over the world a big thing, and Michael Owen is one of the best players in history. So I'm pretty sure everybody knows him.
Well, I mentioned that. I mean, he mentioned we've got a sort of strong Asian connection. You know, our distillery, our product was probably better known in Taiwan, and that's where most of his fan base are. You know, in Asia. So it was a big help for getting people to notice us. So
yeah, and now he's some kind of ambassador for Speyside Distillery. How does it work?
Well, I haven't seen him for a while. I mean, he helped us launch the brand in China and things like that. I would need to check if it was all still active. But a few years ago, he did a lot of online events. You were asking about the business culture. China and Asia is very formal. So, you know, very upmarket whiskey dinners and things like that. And he helped out with a lot of that. And you know, he got us noticed a lot. It's not like it's not as big or as, you know, all consuming as the David Beckham thing, where you know he is part, in a sense, he's in a part of that Hague Empire. But it was an ambassador for a project at the time, which was great. So.
Okay, so he's a nice guy and he did his job, and he's always welcome in the distillery, but he's not connected with it.
Absolutely, he's a lot bigger than some of the rock stars that we used to work with in my old job. So.
That's and the second rock star is yourself. So.
You know, I don't know, some of the people I worked with in my old job, we would probably not let them in the distillery, whereas Michael Owen can come back anytime he wants. It's fantastic.
Okay. Talking about the distillery, you sent me some pictures of the distillery. It's one of them on picture. I up till now I never have been there, and like I said before the show, I will try to visit your distillery in the near future. So, but yeah, they are lovely photos. So, what's the fairground over there? It's nearby a town. Or...
That was obviously taken on the one day of summer that we got 2 years ago. It is a beautiful little distillery. It looks quite old there, but it's actually, I mean, the distilleries, they started building the distillery in 1965 or something. They didn't finish it until 87, and then they started production in 1990. So it's one of a very few distilleries that started producing in 1990. It was originally owned by the Christie family, who owned the North of Scotland grain distillery, and they were the family that owned things like the Scots Selection Indie bottles. Small distillery, although 30 years old this year, it's still very old-fashioned. There's no computerization in there. You know, not a big distillery. Two stills, 4 wash bags, at full capacity, about 600,000 litres a year, and tucked right down in the south of the region. So we are, our closest neighbour is actually Dalwhinnie, although we're still a Speyside distillery. We're the first. We say we're the first distillery that the River Spey passes as it moves north. So if you have anybody else on who tells you that, you know, from further north, that tells you the water is superb and clean and pure, let me know and I'll send them a picture of me having a bath in the river.
Okay, that's a deal. I just saw Juliet is watching as well. So hi, Juliet.
I saw you.
Even Dimitri. Yeah, Paul, everybody who's talking about you is saying the same thing. Paul, lovely guy, a bit nuts, a bit crazy, even, but in the end, very, very professional.
Until the Geneva bar in Ghent appears, yeah. So
yeah, it's a good thing. They all say the same thing.
Well, you know, this is a job where ultimately it's still a job. We you know, if people didn't, there we go. Yes, I know. If people didn't know about our distillery and buy a whiskey, then we wouldn't be in business. So we have to always remember to have that kind of, you know, we're always looking, and you know, I talked to Juliet, and I have the same importer in Italy, so we see each other when we are allowed to travel. We bump into each other quite a lot at trade shows, and there's a little network. We're always sharing. We're always tipping each other off. Juliet, the guys that work at Tomatin and all this, because that's where the business knowledge comes in. Mylan, again, you've had Mezcal on. If you need to know anything about tequila, you need to talk to Mylan as well. So
okay, so Mylan, you're welcome on the show as well. So Chilton says the Geneva bar. It's written in more the Dutch style, so it's Geneva. Just saying, yeah. Chilton.
Yeah, obviously you guys have a big whiskey fair every year in Ghent. There's a little small bar in Ghent. Again, we're all friends, although we work for different businesses. You know, when the fair's finished, we tend to all socialize. More so even when we're traveling, because we you know, quite often you're in the same hotels and stuff. Everybody I know that's worked at the fair in Ghent knows about this Geneva bar. I think it's a little tiny place, but they've got about 2,000 types of Geneva.
Yeah.
And it's got a few of us out at time. So
Yeah. One thing I mentioned, I noticed in Ghent, and that's I think that's the same case for all the brand ambassadors. I met up with Chilton the day before the show started, and he was guiding me through Ghent. Although I'm a Belgian, and he's an Indian guy, and he knows his way all over these towns. And I think it's the same thing for you and the other ambassadors. And that's crazy because you would have thought it's the Belgian guy who has to guide the other one.
Shilton has an encyclopedic knowledge. I mean, we all kind of know our way around a lot of the cities, because every city you go to, pretty much anywhere in the world, every city you go to is going to have a couple of great bars that are well known to the sort of bartending community, or great restaurants. Shilton seems to know more than anybody else that I know. He probably knows more in Glasgow than I do. I certainly know. I was in the office a couple of months ago, and I got a phone call. My office window looks out to the back of the building, so I walked through to the front, and Shilton was on the street outside my office phoning to see if I was in and wanted to come out to play. So he turned up in my, because his hotel was down the street. But
he probably knew that before he booked the hotel. So, being on the road, because you're a lot on the road, what's the only downside of traveling?
There's more than one downside, but I think most of us would probably agree the upsides make up for the downsides. But being in different places is great fun. The traveling to those places isn't much fun. It wasn't much fun before all this Corona started. I imagine it's not going to be much fun afterwards because there's going to be more restrictions at the airports. But yeah, we've all, it's no fun when you're stuck at an airport at 4 a.m. or you've missed a transfer flight at Amsterdam and you've got to wait for the airline to tell you where you're going to stay that night. But on the upside, we get to see, luckily whiskey fairs tend to be in some pretty nice places. So we get to see great liquor stores, great whiskey shops, great cities, basically. There's people pay to go to the places where we get to go to talk about whiskey. So
yeah, is it the same thing? A bit like being a rock star, because you don't
know. I'm not a rock star. I don't have any of that money, so I love the money.
No, you don't have the money, but you do the traveling part. It's a different style of traveling because you don't have your own airplane or something like that, but you do a lot of traveling and you live in hotels for some time. So
yeah, I mean the hotels become. It's nice when you find a place that's different enough to make you remember it when you're staying in hotels, because a lot of hotels look the same everywhere you go. So again, when you travel, you meet other people that do this job, and you get a tip off about a hotel in a certain place. The next year that the show is in that place, you suddenly find everybody has moved into this.
Yeah.
Somebody found a good hotel. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of I don't particularly like working 9 to 5 and working in an office, so this suits me fine. It can be quite tiring for other people, because you might be on the road for weeks at a time, but you trade it off. I like this job. It's a lot of fun, and I think most of us. I don't meet that many people who do this job and who don't like it. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Was that your door or mine?
No. Apparently it's my doorbell. But I think the missus is she's not going. She's watching the show. So normally she would. Okay, she didn't get it. Sorry, I was a bit occupied.
No, that's okay.
It's the first time this happens. It's the first time for everything. And Benny says that they are bringing the honey, and it's true. They're bringing the honey. We're doing an Irish coffee tasting in a few weeks with Chris Hayes, and I ordered a bit of honey from a local honey. How do you call it?
Oh, cool.
So I have been told you don't like the traveling part, and you're just mentioning the traveling, but you really don't like airplanes.
No, I mean, airports are fine. It's a lot. I'd rather fly to Belgium than walk it. But it's just, it's travel. I think maybe if you look at the old movies, travel looked quite glamorous. It isn't really. It's, there's a lot of queuing up and taking your shoes off to go through metal detectors and stuff like that. But the trade-off is you get to have fun at the other end. So
yeah.
That's probably why it's a bit, these online things just now, there's so many, it's great to see them because most of us that do travel, we're probably all going a little bit crazy sitting. This is the longest I've ever been in one place for 3 months now.
Yeah.
So it's great that I've seen you guys and Tomatin are doing broadcasts, Glenallachie are doing broadcasts, Arthur Nagel in Switzerland, Jenny Carlson. It's great because it lets me see the people that I normally work with and lets me know that they're all right and that everybody is still just, ready to go. So it's fantastic to see. It holds our trade together. So thank you.
Yeah. Dimitri says, always want to be on time for the plane.
Dimitri's worked with me in Belgium a few times. Yeah, I'm one of those, I hate turning up with like 5 minutes to go to the plane. If we're doing any show, it's like the last day of the show. And if I know I always like to try and get to the airport like 2 hours before the flight. So
yeah, Juliette is agreeing with you. Traveling is great, but then getting
absolutely.
Yeah, she mentioned that in our show as well. And Lala is saying the life of ambassador is marked in outdoors. You see more on planes and hotels than in your own home. But I have great fun evangelizing the world in our bring peace. I can imagine that.
Exactly right. I'm amazed how dusty my house gets when I live in it. I've been here for 3 months, and it's like you wake up and you're like, my God, I have to vacuum every week at the moment because I live here. When I'm traveling for 6 months of the year, you're never home. You don't realize. So.
Yeah. Now, talking about all the traveling and all, and we didn't mention, we did mention the distillery, but let's start about talking to the whiskeys. First of all, this is you working for the distillery.
That looks like Germany. Yeah, that's Germany.
Yeah, but I've seen you in Ghent.
Behind us, so.
Same pose.
You're lucky because sometimes I take a photograph from here, and you can only see the forehead. So
okay.
But,
so Spy is a fairly new distillery. You have a core range.
Yep.
I found a photo of the core range. I don't know if it's all correct at this point, but
we still have all of those available. Yeah, we've added a little bit to that. This is essentially what we started off with. About when I joined in 2014, we started with about 3 of those. And we had a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old as well. But we had very limited old stocks. We didn't get a lot of old stock when we took the distillery over. So the core range has added up a little bit more. We've introduced some more. On that sheet, you saw the Trutina, which is the bourbon cask, no age statement one, and the Fumari. So we started doing peated whiskey and a simple non-cask finish one. About 2 years after we started with the first 3.
Yeah.
And then from there, we start doing additions, cask strength, and we get to play around with other things. So.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the cask strengths myself. All of them. The Penny, the Fumari.
That was our first cask strength Spey 10 batch 1, which we did a couple of years ago, and it was really well received. So
I can imagine. There's a batch 2 at this point.
There is a batch 2. We've sold out of the batch 2. There will be a batch 3. It was planned for later this year, but with everything that's been going on, I think a lot of our release schedule for the next year is going to move back a little bit because. We had hoped to get batch 3 out for the autumn. Probably going to be next spring, to be honest. So.
Okay. So, again, I don't know if these are all the limited editions at this point. I don't think so, but I don't think the 18-year is not on it, so it's not.
Yeah, our 18-year-old stocks, we were releasing about every time we did a batch of the 18-year-old. When I joined in 2014, the first batch of 18-year-old we did was, I think, 6,000 bottles. Our 18-year-old was all from 1 year stock as well. So it was, the 2014 would have been, 96, for instance. By the time we got to the 99 release, we were down to 1,500 bottles. That's all we could physically fill from the casks from 1999 that we had. The distillery, if you imagine, most distilleries in Scotland in the 90s were shutting down. So, Bruichladdich was mothballed and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
1990, on hindsight, was probably not the best year to open a distillery in Scotland. I mean, they're opening new ones all the time. There's more distilleries have opened in Glasgow in the last 3 years than opened in the whole of Scotland in the 1990s. So, they weren't filling stock that they knew was going to be 18 years old by the end of the 90s. Most of the distilleries were just struggling to stay alive.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't have, a lot of the casks were sold to independent bottlers and things like that. So we had a very small amount. So the 18-year-old is now off the range until we reach a stage where we've got enough to start doing batches again. That said, we did our first 10-year-old 2 years ago. And we've now got a couple of 12-year-olds in the range as well. They're all still limited. We're all still 1,500 or 2,000 or 3,000 bottles. But it's great to get some ages on the bottles again.
And with limited, you mean worldwide, or just for Europe available, or just for Asia available?
No. The thing about things like the Tene and the Fumari and the Trutina, the core range ones, most of those started in Europe. The core range that we started with in the UK in 2014 was actually a range that we were already selling in Asia. That range was then tweaked. We switched. We brought new ones in. We went to non-chill filtered for a lot of the whiskies. We started doing 46% rather than 40. Some of our whiskies for Asia were at 40%. So they have a slightly different range in Taiwan. And things like the cask strength, for instance, they were launched here. It was UK, Europe, and parts of North America where we could sell 70 centiliter bottles. Obviously, the USA takes 75s, and we didn't bottle any in 75s.
When you say that, I get the impression, is Asia not so keen on cost strengths?
Somebody mentioned business stuff earlier on. I've never really done a lot of work in Asia. I've been to China for some judging, but I've never sold my whiskey in Asia. But if you look, I mean, the markets out there, they've got a love for some very traditional things. They love sherry casks. We do bourbon, we do port casks. These are a little bit more in line with what the European whiskey enthusiasts were looking for. The thing is, they become successful in Europe, and then we get the phone calls from our importers in the different Asian countries because they've seen them picking up awards in Europe, and now that helps us introduce them. It's probably easier to introduce things like cask finishes and cask strength in places like Europe because you've got a smaller market, but a much, a great level of enthusiasts. Most people in Europe have been to distilleries. They know what distilleries are capable of. So there's always interest in something new. The further away you get from the distillery, the harder it is to tell somebody about a new product. So if Belgium takes it first.
We need to try in Mexico, for example, incredible, but the drink not number one that is consumed in Mexico City is whiskeys with 55 million liters a year. Mezcal and tequila in fifth place.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I met Lala in China last year on a judging trip. Dimitri was with us as well. And she works with mezcal, but whiskey is huge in Mexico. But, oh my God.
This time it's not me.
That wasn't supposed to happen either. That wasn't supposed to happen either. Mezcal is, she was in China as a mezcal expert, but whiskey's huge over there. And it's like, so we talk occasionally because, what I want to do is now take the whiskies out and try to find importers in places like Mexico. I was in Mexico about 4 years ago, and it was a fantastic place. But you do see a much more limited amount of whiskey out there. But the people out there, they understand spirits. They grew up with tequila and mezcal. They understand high strength.
History.
But for a small independent distillery to get out there is more difficult, So you tend to see the big famous brands. So you see Macallan and Johnny Walker and things like that. But you're seeing more and more of the small distilleries getting to these places now, which is fantastic. So
yeah. It's a growing market.
Oh, absolutely, it's great. I mean, we need the. Somebody asked me once if we envy the big distilleries, but they open a lot of doors for the small distilleries. They can open a door in the market that nobody sells whiskey in, and then once that door's open, we can all work there, and we do. We all pool resources and share knowledge. So
yeah. The first whiskey I have tried from your distillery is this one.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say I wasn't a big fan at that point. I think it was 2012 the first time I tried it, and I was quite surprised of it, to say the least.
There's a couple of different stories. There's there's a couple of different spiels about that whiskey. It's actually now, because we sell a lot of that in America, but our distillery, before we owned it, like a lot of small distilleries in the 90s, they were staying alive. They were selling casks to brokers. They were also one of the distilleries you could go to if you wanted to create a brand. They would create a whiskey brand for you. And this was a distillery that there was a whiskey called Kudu, from the early 2000s, and it was a sort of low-cost version of Lochdu, basically. I think originally supposed to be sold mainly for the Danish market. It was somebody approached the distillery and asked them to make that for them to a brief, and it became quite popular. It was nothing. I mean, none of us worked for the distillery at that point, but when we took over the distillery, or when the distillery was taken over in 2012, people started asking if they knew that whiskey had come from this distillery, although we never actually owned it. So we did a sort of trial batch. We were getting asked if we were going to do the black whiskey again. People always just said the black whiskey, they didn't specify.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to do a small batch to see what would happen. And it probably doesn't appeal to the same whiskey audience that Spey appeals to.
It's different.
But, it's not expensive. There is some colouring caramel in there. So, if you go to Germany, you will see the label on the back that says it's got E150. But the brief was people wanted the black whiskey. And in certain parts of the world, we're sending huge amounts of that out there. What we did do was change we upped the strength. We started using some older stock, and we started using more of the port casks because we wanted to put more flavour in it than had been in the previous releases. And to that end, it works really well. We found a slightly different audience for that.
Yeah.
We did a version of that. We did a version of that for the Harley Davidson Owners Club. Because they have their annual rally in Aviemore, which is the nearest town to our distillery. Yeah. So there's a limited edition version that's got the Harley Owners Group logos on it. We also did a version for the steam train, the Flying Scotsman. So if you go to the museum in York where the train is, you can find the whiskey with the label. And that, I thought whiskey enthusiasts were keen, but until you start working with railway enthusiasts, and you get 50 calls a day in the office because people want the whiskey with the train on it, it's great. But it looks after itself, and it lets us concentrate on, a lot of these new releases wouldn't exist if that wasn't powering away in the background,
And what was the reason? Because the normal bottles are like this. What is the reason? I think I know it, but what is the main reason it's different?
Well, it was never meant to be part of the Spey range.
Mm-hmm.
So we went and used just a more generic bottle. It was never, the Spey bottles we sourced specifically just for the Spey whiskey range. It's nice to see the shelf behind you. It's great that they fit on it as well, actually.
Yeah.
This was it was a side project. It was supposed to be, it's not. It doesn't say on the label. It says in the label it's made at Speyside Distillery, but it doesn't say it's part of Spey. Spey is a brand owned by the Speyside Distillery, if you like. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
it is a separate thing. So.
Okay, so it's just different. at what point you started making gin? Because you started out with whiskey. Of the distillery started out with whiskey. So because I don't think it's has been too long since they arrived on the market.
No, that's about two years. So anybody that a lot of the new distilleries, a lot of the new ventures in Scotland are a lot of the whiskey distilleries 50 years ago, you didn't do distillery tours and things like that. But a lot of the new distilleries that are starting up, they want to make whiskey in a few years' time, but you've got to wait quite a while when you build a new distillery before you start to have any money coming back. And a lot of them are now doing gin. So there's a lot of gin distilleries that are hoping in future to do whiskey as well. But just like we started in Asia and then came back to Europe, we started with whiskey. We put a separate small still in at the distillery, and we do small production runs of gin as well. It's not on sale in every country. We sell most of it through. We've got a little shop in Aviemore, but we do ship some out. I think there's some in Belgium, there's some in Holland, some in Italy now as well. So, and it's great. Again, gin it was something that we had the facility to do. And the good thing about gin is you can make it and it can be put on sale fairly quickly afterwards, which brings revenue in for small businesses. I can only imagine if I was building a distillery from scratch nowadays, waiting 3, 4, 5, 6 years before you can sell the whiskey. This gives you something to do before then. So,
and why the name Byron's Choice?
Our distillery's got a sort of connection to Lord Byron, the poet. The owner of our distillery is from the north of England, from Durham. There's it's now a hotel, but there's a sort of country stately home down there. That was where Lord Byron got married. So with him being in Durham, Seaham Hall, it then got used as it fell into disrepair after the war and was used as sort of unofficial whiskey storage and things like that for various different bottlers. But we'd done a whiskey release a couple of years ago for the Byron Society, which it's a bit like the English version of the Robert Burns societies. And we'd done a whiskey because there was a connection between this house and whiskey smugglers and Lord Byron. We did a bottling for the Byron Society, which they loved. So when we were doing the gin, we didn't want to give it a Speyside gin or things like that. When we were doing the gin, we decided to use the Byron name because we've used it on one of our whiskies previously. We brought the Botanical Society of the UK in, and they let us know which our distillery, as you've seen the pictures, is in a national park. So beautiful lands, lots and lots of different plants growing. So we asked them to sort of advise on things that we might be able to use as botanicals. So it then became the official gin of the Botanical Society as well. So
okay, so you got a little bit of help.
Yeah, well, I mean, our distillery manager certainly knows what he's doing, but it's probably better if we bring some plant experts in to find us botanicals.
Sure.
Let me run around the garden with scissors and probably wise. We use things that have nice flavors.
Yeah, it's safer. Talking about the distillery, I have 2 photos of the distillery on the inside.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before it's not a very big distillery.
No, it's and unusually that pretty much everything is in one room. So the stills are in the same room as the washbacks and the mash tuns. That's up the stairs, but so that's the red. Yeah, so that's the wash and spirit still. So.
Okay, so it's very small. Are there plans, or are they hoping to enlarge the distillery within a few years?
I think every distillery in Scotland would love to do more. It's difficult. That the building it's in is an old 17th century barn that was converted. It's in a national park, so we can't build extensions on.
Okay.
It was never when it was converted, when it was built by the Christies to be used as a distillery. Whiskey tourism wasn't that big, so there's no place to park a bus. It's not open for general tours. It's only open by appointment. We're physically not really able to expand the
Yeah.
buildings that's there.
You're saying it's very small, but you have a visitor center?
We can do tours by appointment where we'll take small groups around and show them. And we have a store with a tasting room and a gallery in Aviemore, which is about 5 miles north. So we class that as a sort of visitor center because you can go in there 7 days a week and you can see everything we do. But you can also arrange an official distillery tour from there, and one of us will show you around.
Okay.
But it's not possible to expand on the site that we're at. We don't even. I mean, our warehousing is in the central belt of Scotland. It's not on site. So, but there's lots of things that people are always looking at. But it's one of those sort of things where if the money was there, you then need to find the land. You then need to find the water. But it's a conversation that comes up every now and again. So.
Yeah. But by the looks of it, it looks great. So I wouldn't hesitate to stay there for a while.
No, you can, and I think our Belgian distributors actually stayed in the cottage that's on site there. We have that set up, and we use that for chilling out, and if we're at the distillery. It's definitely. If we'd love to see more and more people there. It's strange because we're the only distillery there. Most of the other distilleries are quite a bit further away. Although the new Gordon MacPhail distillery, once it's built, will be the closest distillery to us. So they're about, I think they're going in at Boat Garden. So, but it's great. We love letting people in to walk about, especially if they've been around the bigger distilleries. Because we're all in one room, and it kind of tricks people. A lot of people think they've been there before. Because it was in the 1990s, it was used as a location for a TV show in the UK called Monarch of the Glen. So we often see people and think, well, this looks, but it had a fake name on the TV show. It had a different name. Yeah. And they filmed it all around. So we've got still bits of the old TV studios stuck in the cupboards at the distillery. We put the sign up on the wall to confuse people because in the TV show it was called Lag and Moor Distillery. Okay. Occasionally I'll put pictures of that sign up on whiskey forums just to see if anybody can twig. So. Yeah.
I have to ask, Paul, what's your favorite distillery bottled whiskey at this point?
From us or from anybody else?
From the Spy Distillery.
Favorite one? I've got to pick one.
You have to pick one.
Probably, and it will be probably the cask strength of the Tawny Port. The Tawny Port, when they launched the Spey Core range 2014, the Tawny Port immediately became the biggest seller. When we were looking for things to do a little bit later on, there was one of those. It's not a big team, so a little meeting in the office, and I pitched the idea of maybe doing some at cask strength, and we did 3 different versions at cask strength. Only 1,500 bottles because we didn't know how they would be taken by the trade. But that one then won the World Whisky Award for the best no-age statement in Speyside the following year, and immediately people from all over Europe started phoning us. So what started off as this is what I like about small distilleries, because what started as a conversation in the office, within a year was a bottle that was on the market, and within 2 years it was probably known in more countries than we'd ever been to. So,
John says Tenny, simple but wonderfully rounded. And
Thank
Dimitri
you, John.
thinks it's a chairman's choice. For me, it's a Fumari.
I don't have that. Yeah, and again, the Fumari is our first peated whiskey. Another great one. I particularly like the Tenny cask strength because, I was there when the idea was hatched. There was like half a dozen people in the room. We were all in the office when the first samples came in from the casks. Bastian, Penderyn in Germany there. So,
you go international.
We were there when the first samples came in, and we were there when the first bottles arrived. So this is the first one we've seen from idea through to bottling that I was involved with. So, so it makes you proud. So
it makes you proud. Okay, next question. It's the same question, but then all over. So you have to choose one bottle, no restrictions, which distillery or which whiskey you prefer.
Oh, God. Now, that depends on the context of where you tasted it first time. So I will say Bowmore 15-year-old, the one that they call darkest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't normally go for smoky whiskies, but the reason is in 2006, I made my first trip to Islay.
You're paying him.
I wish I was. He's the buyer for a whiskey shop in England. So, hello, Tim. New range out. Yeah, Tim was there as well, actually, about 5th of January in Islay, on the wall outside Bowmore. So I don't know if you've been to Islay yet, but January, it's like 10 below zero. There's a hurricane blowing. The ferry couldn't get out the island. And the Bowmore guide that was showing us the distillery, because we were there with the company, made us go outside and stand on the wall. And we tasted our first Bowmore 15-year-old with the sea spray smashing into your face as you breathe in. And I still haven't managed to make that whiskey taste the same since.
Yeah.
But it's a memory that's there forever. And, every time I see Islay on the TV or online, or you see the folk queuing up overnight outside the distilleries during the Islay Festival, I know why they do that, because that is, whiskey associates itself with memories.
Moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whiskey associates itself with memories. We'd only just become distributors for Bowmore at that point. So that was our first introduction. And I've never seen anybody that could do an introduction like that since.
So it's the moment, the place, and of course, having fun at that point.
Yeah, it's a good whiskey as well. Even without the sea spray and the island views, it's still a fantastic whiskey. But yeah, it's January 2008. So that was 12 years ago. My God.
Gunther, you must go with Paul to a whiskey bar in Glasgow. Fine by me. Is this an invitation?
The invitation's there, but give it a while, because we haven't got the bars open again yet. We need to get the bars open.
Yeah, and
once it's safe to do so, we get the bars open. There is some fantastic whiskey bars in this city. So
okay, we will be joining. Talking about having fun, I found this photo of you and some other guys.
See, this is why. Yeah. Now, the good thing about this, you can tell the guy that's actually the distiller in that photograph, because if you're a distiller, you don't have to have a beard. If you put that photograph back up, oh, geez, look who's here. Everywhere I go, he's like, yeah, everybody in that photograph had a beard except the guy that actually works the distillery. So that's what happens. Good evening, Shilton. How the hell?
Hello, Paul. How are you? You're talking about football.
I think I need a beer now. Oh, and there's Dom Roscoe.
You're talking about whiskey. You're talking about football. I had to crash the party.
Actually, Dom. Shelton, your technology, what's going on? I can't hear him.
I don't think he's talking at the moment.
No, can you hear me?
No?
I know what Shelton likes. There we go. Shelton's favorite.
He actually wanted to talk about it. He asked me, can I go on the show tonight? Because I want to talk about the Fumari. And I was like, yeah, but you had your chance before. And he was like, yeah, but it's Paul. He doesn't have to be there all the time. Let's do, give me Chilton's moment for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Every time I see Shelton in whatever country it is, we always do a little swap, and that's a dram he takes a lot of. So
I love the Fumari. I've got
the Belgian beer tonight, and Shelton's got the whiskies.
In fact, I've got my cast strength Fumari coming as well, so it's on the way.
That's a good thing. Chilton, you mentioned before you were asking Paul's his address. So just to be clear, you said it. You have to do it now.
There's no beers coming. There's no beers coming to you, Paul. I'm sorry.
Well, you know where the office is. you know where the office is, so we will remove the restraining order so you can bring some beers to the office.
I thought so. No, but definitely we'll.
Because at the moment you're not allowed within 50 feet of the office because it makes me want to go out and have drinks. So
I think I also know a few places in Glasgow where you can get some good Belgian beer. So let's do it next time.
yeah, we got some great beers available in Glasgow.
Let's do it.
I can never remember how the evenings finish when the beers start. So
That's a good thing.
This is another guy that's been. Pardon me?
You can say whatever you want.
No, I'm losing. It's a bit crackly on the signal, but this is another guy that's been keeping us sane through this lockdown because he puts his own videos up of, he's become the king of TikTok.
Yeah.
And I think when all this is over, we need to give Shilton TV show because those TikTok sketches are legendary. So
Yeah, he can't stop working for the whiskey industry.
I'm practicing on my acting skills actually.
Peter's saying Indian Michael Jackson. I think that's a very correct name. Even that part. Tilton, you wanted to say something?
And I think he means the dancing Michael Jackson, not the whiskey one. So.
No.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he thinks. Tilton, you wanted to say something to Paul? Just go ahead and go for it.
No, Paul, I just wanted to. I mean, I love the Fumari. I've got the cask strength coming in as well. So if you can just tell more about Fumari. If you can just tell us. Yeah.
Well, this is our first peated whiskey. The distillery, like a lot of small distilleries, we're not known for peated whiskey, but for the last couple of weeks of each distilling year, we change the barley, and we buy in peated barley. So about 3 years ago, we started pulling cask samples out, maybe 3-4 years ago, and we had to put. We were going to do some single cask stuff first. And we did actually for Belgium. We did a single cask in Belgium. But we then tasted all the different samples and we decided to do a full on peated whiskey to join the unpeated whiskies that we already produce. So it's only produced for, we only do the peated barley 3 weeks of each year.
Yeah.
But we can do 18,000 bottle batches. The whole idea, I don't know if you've seen this one, but this is very natural bourbon cask, 46%, no peat, very light, very delicate, very fragrant. We still wanted that there, but we wanted to smoke. We didn't want the islas, we didn't want the seaweed we're nowhere near the beach, so we wanted sweetness and smokiness at the same time. And I think we've done all right with that as well. One that you should look out for. I don't know if Gunther still got some, but we did a bottling for our Belgian distributor a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And it's a single cask.
It's not the same.
If you actually look at the distillation date, sorry?
It's not the same, I think. This one is for Belgium.
What does your label say?
It's selected for the Benelux.
That's the most recent one. This was the first one. So this one is a peated one. But if you look at the distillation date on the label, it's hard to see from there. But the distillation date is 23rd of December 2008.
Yeah.
So it ties in with us using peated barley at the last couple of weeks of each year before we close for Christmas. And that was one barrel. So that effectively is a single cask version of the Fumari.
Okay.
And is Fumari if I understand it right, is Fumari your only peated whiskey in the range as well?
Yes, at the moment. We've got that, and we've got a cask strength version of it, and we've done some single casks that are peated.
Yeah.
Whether we might do some peated ones in the future with different casks, but because we've only got peated spirit running for 3 or 4 weeks of the year, so the scope for experimentation is a little bit reduced. There's less of that than we could do with the unpeated. So.
Okay, and your cast strength,
those-
Fumari. Sorry, go ahead.
This is funny.
Cash strength Fumari. I'm losing the signal a little bit with you guys, but cash strength Fumari is exactly the same as the standard one, but obviously bottled up at 58, 59%, depending on the batch. And again, when we did the cash strength Tenny, we did 3 different cash strengths. All have been really well received. The 2 biggest sellers from the cash strength are probably actually the Fumari, because the smokiness is so different, and the Tenny, because the port cask gives it a lovely sweet flavour. But the Trutina, which is the bourbon cask unpeated, is also worth a look.
Yeah. You can try that next time.
And then watch, because we've got... Yeah, and watch. We're just about... It'll be on its way to Belgium soon. We're just about to release a 12-year-old. We did a 12-year-old peated whiskey, not Fumari, but an aged version. And we've got a 12-year-old port cask. So a bigger brother to the Tenny, which should be on its way to Belgium in the next couple of weeks. So
okay,
it's great to have age statements back in the range.
Yeah.
So you guys plan to get the age statement back on the range? That's what you said, right? Are you guys planning to get the age statement back on the range as well?
Are you planning to the range?
Yeah, as we can. Yeah, we've just launched a 12-year-old port. So we've got two 12-year-olds in the range. They are limited edition, so 3,000 bottles each time. But the idea is, we took over the distillery in 2012. If you look at the production records for the distillery, production went up and down over the years. So production started increasing again in the mid 2000s. So we're starting to have more stock coming of age again. So the idea is that we do want to do more age statements. We'll have a mixture of age and non-age in the range, I'm sure. But...
Paul, John is asking a question. What influenced the decision to make peated whiskey when it's not really traditional for Speyside Distillery to make one?
Oh, good question, John. What influenced the decision? If you look, I think most small distilleries, one of the fun things about a small distillery is, we don't have huge budgets, but the scope for experimentation is there. So, we're all involved in different barrels. We can choose the barrels, we can choose the vatting concepts. And the distillery manager wants to, the last couple of weeks of each year is when experiments, so they might change the yeast or the barley. Some of these experiments you may never see because they don't yield good results. But in the case of using peated barley at our distillery, we felt it was good enough to show people what that experiment was. And not typical for Speyside, but then if you walk around, if you travel around the Speyside region, you will see that, several others, Ben Romac, Ben Riach, even Balvenie have a whiskey called Peat Week. So this, my guess was experiments that might have been going on in other distilleries in the same region, when all the distillery managers get to, have some say in experimentation at the end of each year. It's usually the last couple of weeks before they shut for maintenance. But there's now, Tomatin have got Kuboken, and it's not even Speyside. If you go to Arran, they've got Macri Moor. So there are distilleries that are known for unpeated whiskies now, who several of them have now got peated whiskies as part of their range as well. So my guess is that's an experiment that lots of people were doing, and we've all had good results with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chilton, other questions?
Yeah.
To the extent I wish we'd made more of it.
Chilton, you're planning some other movies as well, I presume. Are there plans to make one with Paul?
I've got a few more planned up as well. It all depends how long I am sitting in the house. So it's not something I'm used to. Just as Paul, I was listening to Paul as well. It's not something that we are used to being at home. But then it all, keep yourself busy with something. So I'm just trying to keep myself busy with whatever I can do.
but can you make one with Paul? Because I know for a fact Paul is very good in those special occasions.
Oh well, Paul, we can. Come on.
Oh, there we go.
Because you're a natural.
You know, I only learned to ride those scooters because of Felton.
I remember it was in Frankfurt as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Frankfurt. So,
So, Chilton, we have to say goodbye. Thank you.
Guys. Thank you. Good stuff, Paul. I'll see you. I'll see you soon.
cheers.
Again.
Bye, Chilton.
You're welcome.
Bye,
Take care. See you somewhere.
Yeah.
So that was Chilton.
Yeah.
Another question: what peat is used?
Okay. Well, we source we buy the barley peated already. It comes in from Crisps at Port Gordon. It's not Isla peat. We try and specify that it's Highland peat. So hopefully you get the smoke, but you don't get the seaweed or less of the seaweed in the maritime stuff. So
yeah, I especially like the flavor. It's like having a barbecue and you're smelling the coals warming up. Not the meat, not yet, but just the beginning of a nice barbecue, and I really love it.
well, I mean, it's worth whenever you're looking at whiskies from this region or whiskies from anywhere in Scotland. If you see a peated one from a distillery that's not normally known for peated whiskey, it's worth trying because there's some incredible variations out there. And it's great. We have it's whiskey. We have to work with a strict set of rules on how we produce, what barrels we can use, things like that. But the combinations you can get are still being discovered now. So,
are there plans to try an Isla peat just to see what difference it makes?
I'd love to. There's no formal plans, but I'd love to try it. The reason we did the Fumari, I mean, we were when we sat down to taste it originally, we had samples from each year of production in the office. And the levels of the ppm levels were different in every single year. So some years it was crazy strong. Other years it's very subtle. So to do an 18,000 bottle batch, we vatted together because we didn't want the second batch to be vastly different from the first. That's why we didn't do a vintage date on the Fumari, because if we'd done a 2004 release and then a 2005, there was a massive difference. So we were, we must have been experimenting and just buying in different styles each year. Every time I've tasted different casks, there may well be some casks that we've not tried yet that they've put Isla peat to, but not found them yet. So.
Okay, Paul, you're known for having to love having a good time, and you have great friends.
That's my man, Izzard. So
yeah, there are a lot of friends you have in the scene. By the way, Kenny is joining us in a few weeks.
Oh, good. His new independent bottled stuff's amazing. You need to try it.
Yeah. I had to try a few.
Kenny helps us out at a lot of events. We're not a big company. That picture you put up was from a movie premiere at the Edinburgh Festival. So that goes back to the question about business formats, because that's a movie premiere. It was the premiere of Whiskey Galore. So Eddie Izzard in the front of the picture was the star of the film, but we were asked to do. Kenny's actually in that movie as an extra.
Okay.
That's how we ended up at the premiere, because the people that were doing the premiere at the Edinburgh Film Festival got let down by who they were trying to find as a sponsor. So we loaned them some empty barrels that they could use to dress the venue and make it look like an old whiskey warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, we got in. But that was because Kenny was an extra in the movie, and he mentioned to the director or the producer that he knew somebody that worked for a distillery who might be able to find them some empty casks when they got let down. So there's companies out there that think we paid £100,000 to sponsor that party, and it didn't. It was a couple of bottles of whiskey and some old barrels. So it was a great night. So.
Old school style.
Yeah, I mean, getting the barrels to Edinburgh was unusual, because that place was a really old-fashioned, very famous old library with, you know, old master paintings on the wall. So everything you touch and break is worth hundreds of thousands. And we're rolling barrels down the
So
barrels down the hallway. So
yeah,
it's a very scary setup. So.
I can imagine that. You know Hans Offega?
Yeah.
Yeah, he will be joining us next Wednesday. It's our last Wednesday, by the way. And after that, we will be airing on Mondays. So, and I don't know if you know the guys from Sleer's Distillery, German distillery.
I do a lot of work in Germany, so I've bumped into the Sleer's guys, but I haven't tasted
then
all their whiskey.
I have Paul Klok, Ronald Zwartepoort, and of course Kenny on the 20th July, of course. So you can join us that time and ask him a lot of questions.
I will do. Ronald I know quite well. I met him at Glen Grant Distillery about 15 years ago.
Okay.
And Hans, I sat on a tasting he did in The Hague, and it was bourbon and blues, and it was fantastic. So.
Actually, Dimitri told me about it. You're a jury member in a spirit, or more than one spirit competition. How does that work? You're invited, or?
Originally, I was invited. The first time I got invited was Mexico, which is where I met Mylene and Lala, because they were there as people who work with tequila and mezcal. Dimitri's been out there. The organization that staged that competition was Concours Mondial de Brussels. So, you know, we have always had a really good relationship with those guys. It's part of the reason, you know, I think it's that their logo that's behind me in the photograph you used. They're based in Brussels. They staged this large competition, not so well known to British distilleries. I'd love more British distilleries to send whiskies to them. But you know, every year, I mean, last year we were in China, and, you know, 1,800 spirits were evaluated, every type of spirit, baijiu, cognac, rum, some amazing people on the juries, and they don't give out a lot of awards, so the ones that get the awards are really worth hunting down. So.
Okay, and how do you taste? You have to taste more than 10, I presume, on one day, or just 5?
Yeah. Every competition is a little bit different. You're not trying to find the best spirit, but you're judging it. You'll get presented with a tray of spirits, maybe 5 or 6 or 10, and you're told minimal information. So this might be world whiskey. Yeah, this might be world whiskey. It's blind. You never see the bottle. So this is world whiskey, or this could be a tequila, or this could be a rum. And then you taste and evaluate. You write your tasting note. There's 6 judges per table, and the scores are aggregated. If the product scores above a certain level, it then goes into medal territory. So if it scores above 90, it may get a silver or a gold. If it scores above 95, it gets a higher medal. Depending on the product, some, you know, there are competitions all over the world. IWSC is the big one in this country. The World Whiskey Awards is another one only for the whiskey industry. Spirit Selection, which is the Concours Mondial de Brussels, covers pretty much every spirit, and I love that one, because, you know, last year I shared a table with the lady who's the marketing person for Metallica's whiskey was on my table, and so was Marc de Rose, the Armagnac producer, and where else do you get to tap into knowledge like that? So
yeah, so you're loving it.
I do. I wish I could do more of it. It's great. Again, it ties in well with everything. I mean, most of us do this job because we're interested in the product. So to do more of that as well, it's not work. It's fun. But it's but you know, these things are good. And if you ever get the chance to take part in any of these, whether they're local ones, regional, national, international, you should take it, because you get to meet so many very cool people. So
okay. Good to know. I will sure do. Paul, we're at the end of the show. Is there anything you want to say to the viewers, what we didn't mention before? Or
I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in. I said it during the broadcast, but these online things, I think, are it's new for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
Still getting used to technology. Dom Roscoe, whose name popped up earlier on, phoned me when I was out buying beer, and I took his FaceTime call. I didn't know it was FaceTime, so he spent the whole call looking into my ear, because I don't know how the technology works. But this kind of stuff it keeps me in contact with everybody I know in the industry. It keeps us all sane, or sane-ish. And I hope that as we all start to get back to a more normal way of life, this is something that can continue as well. So thank you everybody for tuning in.
I'm pretty sure it will be going on, because if one thing is for sure, although COVID will be gone one day, I think a lot of people, yeah, let's hope so, but a lot of people get to know internet and online tastings. Is it better? It's different. You don't have to drive after us. You don't have to get a cab or a responsible driver, things like that. So that's a good thing. Otherwise, the big difference is you don't share a dram with your friends next to you, and you can live talk about it, and that's different.
Yeah, I miss that. That bit is something I miss. I want to get back to the time when I can actually pour somebody a dram, and they can pour one of theirs, and we swap and we exchange from there.
Yeah, it's like John, it's great, but not as good as meeting in person. It's
absolutely. But then you think tonight there's been messages up there from Mexico, from Germany, from Belgium, from Scotland. I couldn't put that many people in a room. And even Tim from Blackpool put a message up. So they're coming in from everywhere. So we can reach a huge audience.
Even Blackpool.
He works in Blackpool.
Okay.
How do I say it? He's from Liverpool. So.
Okay. Paul, thanks a lot. I will be seeing you in the back after this. I will give you the last word so you can talk to the viewers, and you can trash talk me or whatever you want. It's all up to you. So thanks a lot, and see you later in the back. Okay? Don't go away.
Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's Saturday night. Best noise in the world. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you.